To those of you who have never met me in person, I spoke with many of you over the phone and not met, but I am a realtor by trade, but I am a home builder by lineage. So my father's Pat Cleary, and my grandfather is Leo Cleary, who was one of the early sort of inaugural founders of the Peterborough Kawartha Home Builders Association. And coincidentally, our Home Builders Association was one of the first, as it goes by Dave Mitchell's recountances, and Murray might know better as one of the local historians here. It was possibly the first home builder association in Ontario, and it was a model that was so powerful in lobbying for the community's rights in terms of builders that were pushing back against the same classic battles of continuing piled on legislation and cost. The builders band together, and they were so effective in pushing back against the charges and regulations of the time that it was recognized by other municipalities and modeled elsewhere. So Dave Mitchell went from Peterborough, working alongside with my grandfather Leo Cleary, and they went and instituted the same sort of framework in other municipalities, and it was eventually adopted at the provincial level. And in that same provincial framework, which is the Ontario Home Builders Association, and there's also the Canadian Home Builders Association, it is responsible directly for a lot of the influence of the legislation which we've spoke about here today, such as Bill 23, Bill 109. And a lot of that is the voice of the industry saying that we're here ready and willing to build homes and to do a job, but it has just become impossible. And that's the essence of the message. That's a brief introduction to myself and what I'd like to say before I go on to too many tangents here, because of course this has been a lengthy morning of information for everybody to take in. So what can I uniquely add to this message? If there was one thing, it would be the message to you in this room to get involved. The example of my grandfather and the Peterborough Kawartha Home Builders Association and the ability they have had to lobby issues over the years and do PR and government relations at a serious, real level, because it affects and matters to the people of that industry. There's not many industries that are more closely related to the issues that we're talking about than the people in this room. And I think that everyone in this room stands to benefit so largely by getting deeply involved in the topics and issues that we're talking about here today, because it's so core and central to the depth of your professionalism and ability to understand and sell your city and know what's truly happening with the moving parts. My own observations in my time in the industry is that it's quite segmented in terms of people's involvement. Some of the commercial realtors more so involved at the local political level, but I think everybody stands to gain from keeping up to date on the county meetings or the council meetings, pardon me, and just really gathering a firm grasp and understanding of what the issues at stake are and making your voice heard, because there's just not enough people that actually apply pressure for the positive side of seeing homes built. There's a lot of pressure on these gentlemen here who work the planning and the staffing jobs, because unfortunately the more vocal groups outside of ourselves are the people who don't want to see anything built. For every one of us that would love to see this city develop, grow, flourish, and see the vision that's been clearly communicated, executed in full, there's an equal amount of people who are very protectionary over every different special interest group that could possibly be protected in the city, from heritage blocking mid-rise, high-rise in our downtown core, onto, of course, the conservation efforts. That, you know, our city is very near and dear because of our wildlife and our natural heritage and our beautiful natural elements. There is a very protective core that is extremely vocal. So when Bill 109 and when Bill 23 recently came through and was approved, there was protest from the environmental groups, and there's no instance to my working memory where there's been protests where we see large housing developments turned down and anybody protesting the fact that those housing units were not brought online. And so why is that? Do we not care deeply enough about the actual results and repercussions for bringing housing on? Because those people who care so deeply about the environmental issues were willing to go stand outside in the cold with signs and protest against Bill 23, which was clearly positive net outcomes in terms of how much housing would be provided. But then on the reciprocal and on the flip side, when we see things that don't go in a way that will actually help create more housing, the voices are in closed rooms. Nobody in our arenas really gather to actually voice, hey, we have to draw the line here and we have to make sure that we're staying on track with this vision. So just to back out, I'm just going to go over a couple more core concepts and then try and wrap it up here. I was reading a biography recently from Jeff Bezos, of course, the founder of Amazon, massive corporation. And these massive corporations, they're always fighting as they grow, sort of the creeping bureaucracy of the ability to make decisions and require results. But the difference that they have versus government entities is that if they don't make the right decisions, they will fail and they will disappear. The liberty of governments is that they tax the populace and by necessity they can be voted out, but they can never disappear. So the decisions are just not as pointed in terms of how much accountability is required. It's worth noting that our current federal government ran on housing affordability. You can still find some of the documents from Justin Trudeau's current party that back in 2015, housing affordability was, to my memory, in the first 10 pages of his platform documentation. So clearly violated, never looked back on, and so spun around every time that actual accountability was mentioned in terms of people saying, hey, what happened to that? Well, now I don't need you to love me for that anymore, so I'm on to the next thing. And so accountability is very key in terms of our politicians. But back to the Bezos discussion and bureaucracy. Because they cannot make all the decisions for all their people all the time, and they need to have a top-down filtering process, there's a basic framework that they ask all their people who are making decisions to work through. Is this decision reversible easily or not? And if it's not easily reversible, yes, take time to deliberate over it, think deeply, get engaged in discussion, be willing to change your opinion. But if the decision is easily reversible or inevitable that it will not be able to be turned over, then you have to act quickly and you have to move. So we have to classify our decisions in two different sort of categories. And the decisions that are easily reversible or not of massive gravity need to be made quickly, and then action needs to be taken. And I think that locally, within our systems, in our operating systems, in our cultures at the municipal level, not just here, but across Ontario. And by the way, I will take some pressure off of the gentlemen here, because no city made it out unscathed. There was not a standalone, unmarked, there's no, you look at Niagara, look at Belleville, look at Cornwall, look at Kingston, all these other mid-sized cities, they all saw explosive price growth through COVID and through our last 5 to 6 years of mass immigration. They all saw explosive price growth. They're all seeing massive homelessness. We are not alone in this, but this is an issue that is not going to go away. So I think that when it comes to adding planning staff, yes, we know we do, and thumbs up to that. We are so excited at PKHBA to see new planning staff being onboarded. But another analogy to liken this to get some perspective is that we don't just want to add horsepower to a system, a vehicle, you name it in terms of your analogy, that isn't going in the right direction. So we need, under Brad's watch, Jazzbeer, Devon, we need strong, firm direction. We need the ability for individuals to make decisions quickly without feeling like they're always going to be scrutinized for saying yes. We need to promote saying yes and make it easier for these gentlemen to say yes than it is to say no, because right now they can face many more headaches and the pitchforks come out much more when they say yes than when they say no historically. So we have to apply the pressure on the yes side and equal out and counterbalance the amount of NIMBYism that's out there and make it so that it's easier to say yes than to say no. And then just one last thing I'd like to sort of narrow in on here is that time is a concept that is extremely abstract, and it's normally glossed over in these discussions. We go so deeply into the conversation of conservationism, money, capital budgets, but time is an elusive concept, so it's not really drilled into and spoken about at depth because it's not that well defined. And one thing that I believe is core to the definition of time is that it can be tracked only by events that are irreversible. And I know this only because I have an Amazon Prime subscription, which has a really good channel on it, that has a documentary fully on time. And it's very boring, but I made it for the first few episodes. But time is literally defined by events that are irreversible. So once they have happened, you can't go back. This can be thought of in terms of chemical reactions, where sometimes once you mix two compounds, you can never get the water molecule back out of that. You can't go back in time to recreate that. So there's something that's fundamentally changed about reality that moment in time will never exist again. The same thing is true of wars. After World War II, the world will never be the same. Certain things can be looked at as this time has this essence of irreversibility. And my point with that is that we need to have urgency, because there are things happening on a daily and weekly basis right now that are irreversible. And namely, what I would say is that what happens when we don't create new housing? Who's truly affected? Think of everybody in this room who's worked with individuals. I myself have gone around for 9 months with individuals who granted their parents money as a down payment. We're going out shopping for homes in the $500,000, $600,000 range. And after 9 months of looking, they gave up because the interest rates shot up. Something changed with their job. They just couldn't rationalize how they could afford to hold this property. This is 30-year-old professionals, some of them working at the city, most of them working designations that they would have thought someone would have been proud to see them hold when they were children, and they can't afford a home in this city. So what happens? It's a complex discussion about how, why, when somebody turns to alternative ways of making themselves happy, and how they end up going down a wrong road in life. But many people are on the brink of financial failure at this point in time, and especially in our city, the metrics of how much money you can make in terms of your income you go out there and afford to own a home and what it costs, they don't support each other. So people start to look at themselves, am I a failure? What have I done wrong? Have I not made it? And then very, very quickly, a beer a night turns into 6, and then people just start to go down a road where they're really not that content in their life, and they just give up. And then so for every person, people start to become disenfranchised from the housing system, and the homelessness is growing, and more people are thinking, I'll never own a home. And then they're making they're going down paths which in some respects are irreversible. And to zoom back out one more layer, there's been fundamental changes throughout history where there's things that change the course and trajectory of our history. And we're in the middle of one right now. You can look at the Industrial Revolution, you can look at the technological revolutions that have been underway over the last decade and 20 years. And the thing about technology is that it expands exponentially over time. So the amount of technology that we have now is exponentially different than it was 2 years before, and then 2 years before that. Populations grow in the same manner. So we are exponentially growing, and Canada is on the map. This is a discussion between Peterborough people in a room that's about Peterborough, but you can go onto Reddit sub-forums, and Peterborough, the Greater Golden Horseshoe, is being talked about in forums from people all over the world because our immigration policies are favorable, and we are a place of peace and natural beauty. We are on the map, and whether or not we want to grow, we will be growing massively. As Dave said, our targets this year, 500,000 people. That's more than the United States immigrates, and they're nearly 10 times our size. And then you take that when people do immigrate to the U.S., they disseminate over a larger land base. They have many places to choose from. Here they come to Ontario, they come to BC. And pardon me, yes, sorry, yes.
No, sorry, that wasn't the reason.
No, sorry. I know I'm probably far over my time, and I do apologize. I had about 5 points I wanted to say, and throughout the day I've just been jotting notes because this is such a deep topic. So, just to round it out, what are we all doing here? Land planning. What is land planning? We're planning the future use of our lands, literally the face of Mother Earth. You're going to be able to zoom out in satellite view in years from now. Peterborough is going to look different than it is today. That's inevitable. And is it going to look like a downtown that has exponential amounts more homelessness? Or is it going to have beautiful towers? And is it going to have well-planned, inclusionary zoning, mid-density subdivisions? Plenty of them. And is it going to have jobs that can support the local incomes? Or are we going to continue to be crashed by GTA Durham residents who are willing to take that extra 45-minute commute to come take access of our slightly more affordable real estate, but not come here and work in jobs that serve and grow in our community? So if we don't have that vision and we don't execute on it ourselves, it will be decided for us, because we cannot just flip off the immigration switch. That is inevitable, and so we can't duck and hide from the change that we are in the middle of, and we can only embrace it and be really the founders of our own vision. And back to what we're talking about here, I believe we have good plans. We have very good plans, and we just need to now empower the private enterprise individuals who are willing to build this stuff out. And I'm gonna end with one last thing, and it's a brief story. I sell property now for Paul Dietrich, Dietrich Homes, and back in the day, him and my father were somewhat sworn enemies. So it's humorous. And they've become so close now because they're so akin in terms of the battles they've been through in terms of getting developments online, the types of stories you hear. Buy a piece of land, 10 years later, it's shovels in the ground. And Paul is quick to remind me, and Pat also, that back when they were building it, when they were stern competition, there was over 30 builders that they could think of by name that were competing to buy and build on the same lands as they were. And to Paul's note now, that number may be 5 or 6. Peter Holmes, Triple T, we know all the same groups that are here. Why is that? It's because our industry now operates less like a free enterprise organization or free market enterprise, and it's more like a quasi-monopoly, similar like a telecom industry, where only a big few can survive because the capital costs are so intensive to be in the game, and the ring round that you have to go through is so convoluted that you have to know this special race, so not everyone can compete. So we have instances where there's tract builders who are no longer innovating in terms of their product because they don't have to, quite frankly. They bought land 10 years ago and they're going to sell those homes no matter what they build on that lot. So it's killing the innovation. And back then, if you didn't provide the best product at the best price and bring it to the market, someone else would buy someone else's home that was $5,000 cheaper, and it was pushing. They were fighting to sell homes on Tower Hill Road in around $100,000. So that's just the final words are: get involved. We want to see free enterprise. We don't need more regulation at this point. I do believe we need less. I believe that the individuals that are in the place of power are extremely responsible, and they have the right stewardship and the right vision for not seeing our lands go to waste and our natural heritage features. But we do need to not over-regulate and get to work. So that's it. Thank you, everybody.